Welcome to Pivot Interactives. In this introductory activity, we'll investigate the density of a solid. So, what we'll do is look at the tools involved in the basic process for how to answer questions in Pivot Interactives that will satisfy our lab for this particular activity. Recall that volume is length times width times height. So we're going to obtain that information from the Pivot Interactive itself. Pivot Interactives uses videos rather than computer simulations to present the physical event of study. Density, as you might recall, is equal to mass per unit volume, or mass divided by volume. That mass will be expressed in grams in this case, although in physics we tend to use kilograms as our standard unit for mass. So let's get started. What we have is a video that is going to showcase the event. And what I'm going to do is set it to full screen and allow it to play just so we see what happens. At the very beginning, what we see is that there's a scale and it reads 0 grams because nothing is on it. It's been teared out. I'm going to hit play, and what we'll see is a metal object that is placed on the scale. So we can record its mass. It freezes at about 127.1110, somewhere in there. It's then turned around, so it faces us with another side. And we let it settle. And again, it's about 127.1 grams because rotating the object does not change its mass. Okay, so that's the event. Before we actually perform some measurements and show you how to do that, we'll scroll down here and see what the interface looks like for answering questions. Again, we're going to produce all the answers here in Pivot Interactives and not on Blackboard Learn. Blackboard Learn is where your grade will be posted, but all the work will be done here in Pivot Interactives. So the first question is open-ended, and it asks, should the density of a metal depend on its volume? Explain your reasoning. And the score would be out of 10 points. Number 2, it includes a set of instructions. I'll make sure the video is set to substance 1, so I'll show you how you can change that. And then we'll open the tool menu. So there are tools within Pivot Interactives that allow us to make measurements. In this case, the measurement will be for length. Then, once we make that measurement, we come back here and we want to choose one of these values over here. Now, if we're measuring length, likely this 127.1 grams, that indicates the mass. That's probably not the right answer. Just saying. For every question here that is multiple choice, you get 2 attempts, okay, to get the right answer. But we can eliminate one immediately just based on the fact that the unit is different. Then later on, we'll try and calculate the volume. It's in centimeters cubed. They keep to centimeters. In physics, we do tend to use meters for most of our calculations and expressions. Here, we'll stick with centimeters cubed. And ultimately, we're going to try to find the density of the substance, grams per centimeter cubed, which for a liquid would be the same as a milliliter. And once we submit our answers, we can then lock that answer and continue. So I'll see that and be able to grade it. The unknown metal that we'll see later, we'll have to complete this. So essentially, once we get the skills down, you'll be able to do that part on your own. So they're going to have a metal, and we're going to go through the same, you would go through the same process to try to find its density. And then there's a table of density, so you can try to identify that metal based on that property. Now, you can also identify metals through other properties too. Is it magnetic? What is its color? Does it have luster? Things like that also help identify metals. But in this case here, we'll be able to use the physical property of density to do that. So let's go back to number 2 and make the measurement for height so you can see how that's done. So again, I'm going to full screen the video. And video is just a series of pictures set in time, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So what we can do is take this slider here and move it to where we want it. So we want to move it to a moment where there's no hand in the way and the scale is settled. Okay, so it's settled at about 127.1110. It kind of wavers just a little bit between those two at that very last decimal place. These very sensitive scales, if there's a slight breeze or even breathing on them, you can change that hundredths value pretty easily. So it's not encased. The ones that we have in the lab at Isnuntuck, The good ones have a case that goes around it to prevent just that. Well, top right over here, we have tools. And we click on the tools and we have two options. We have the horizontal measurer, okay? And so that we can move around with your mouse, grab it, or you can do that on a tablet as well by just tap dragging. But the question was to measure height, even though we will need width as well. We'll get the height first, okay? You can turn them on both at the same time. It looks a little confusing that way. So we'll just have the one for height going. So let's turn on the height. All right, and we're gonna measure. And it looks like it's a little more than 3. Like 3.2 centimeters looks like it's a pretty reasonable value given the scale that we have. All right, so we would do that, and notice that the height should be the same when it's turned around, and it is. So what we'll have is measurement of height, length, and width to get the volume. For changing the video, you hit change, and there are 6 possible substances. So you'll choose a different one, number 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So let's just choose 4. You hit load, and then there's a new item that comes up. It leaves your tools up for the moment, but it's going to be the same thing. Let's turn that tool off and view this video, and it's going to be a different block. Okay, it has different dimensions, maybe a different color to it as well, and a different mass. And so what you can see is that Pivot Interactives uses real footage of a physical event and just changes the video when we need to make a variation. In this case, the variation will be the block and thus the density. Okay, and so that's how we go. So let's answer this over here. We said 3.2 centimeters, but let's choose the wrong answer just to see what happens. 3 centimeters is close, and it says make sure you use all of the marks on the ruler. So it gives you a little bit of a hint where you can go back, not just the ones labeled with a number. Okay, so we hit 3.2 and submit answer. You need to submit it to save it, for it to save and be graded. Boom, there we go, great work. So you get some feedback in the system. Okay, so your task would be to finish this, to get the width and the depth for this object, and compute the volume. Then from the volume and the mass of 127.1 grams, determine its density. And then you're going to go off to the next activity for the unknown metal. And that's how it works. So you can see how you can find the right spot in the video to make a measurement and record as such. All right. I wish you success in Pivot Interactives. Very good. Let's settle it there. Morad out.